students, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we will talk about the first lesson in our second term syllabus. Our first unit is called chemical reactions. The first lesson is called chemical reactions. Firstly, we need to know what is meant by chemical reaction. Chemical reaction, it is the breaking up of bonds in molecules of reactants and formation of new bonds in molecules of products. We have studied this definition before. We said that the chemical reaction is to break the bond between the molecules of the reactants and forming a new bond between the molecules of products. For example, if we have a reaction between magnesium and oxygen to form magnesium oxide. In this reaction, we break the bond between the double covalent bond between two oxygen atoms, and each oxygen atom combine with one magnesium atom through ionic bond to form magnesium oxide compound. What is the importance of chemical reactions in our life? Chemical reactions have a very important role in our life. For example, the burning of car fuel in the car engine, it produces or generates a power which makes the car moves. The plant's food is produced by the photosynthesis process. In this process, the plant uses carbon dioxide from air, water from the soil and minerals, and the sunlight to produce food and oxygen gas. And this is a chemical reaction. The production of medicines, fertilizers, artificial fibers, all those are examples of chemical products that have been produced through chemical reactions. And now we will talk about the types of chemical reactions. We have three types of chemical reactions. Firstly, decomposition reactions, substitution reactions, oxidation and reduction reactions. We will talk about each type of them briefly. Let's talk firstly about the decomposition reaction or thermal decomposition reaction. Thermal decomposition reaction is a type of reactions which involves the breaking up of compounds by the effect of heat into its elements or simpler substance. طيب بالراحة كده نتكلم عن يعني thermal decomposition reaction. كلمة thermal معناها using heat. كلمة decomposition معناها breaking up or breaking down. So the definition of thermal decomposition reaction is the reaction which occurs by using heat to break up the compound into simpler substance or into elements. This is the reactant, this is the compound. By using heat, the compound is breaking up into simpler substance which is the product. Let's talk about examples for the thermal decomposition reactions. Firstly, we will talk about thermal decomposition of metal oxide. Before talking about the thermal decomposition of metal oxide, we need to know what is meant by metal oxide. Metal oxide is a compound that formed by the reaction between metal and oxygen. When the metal oxide is heated, it decomposed or breaking down into simpler elements or simple elements, which are the metal and the oxygen gas. And as we have been studied before, we can identify the presence of oxygen gas, or we can detect the presence of oxygen gas by using a splint. The glowing of a splint increases as oxygen gas doesn't burn, but it helps in burning. The example for thermal decomposition reaction is the decomposition of mercuric oxide. We need to know the name of the compound, the symbol of the compound, and also the color of the compound. في كل الرياكشنز في كل الايكويشنز بتاعت الثيرمال ديكومبوزيشن رياكشنز والايكويشنز اللي بعد كده في الاذر تايبس. احنا محتاجين نبقى عارفين اكتر من حاجه. اول حاجه النيم اوف كومباوند، السيمبل بتاع الكومباوند بتاعي، والكالر كمان. الميركوريك اوكسايد السيمبل بتاعه HgO. الميركوريك اوكسايد الكالر بتاعه is red. When we heat mercury oxide, it decomposes into mercury and oxygen. The mercury have silver color. So, the metal oxide, when it decomposes by heat, it forms metal and oxygen. And the example of this reaction is the decomposition of mercury oxide to produce mercury and oxygen. This is the mercury oxide. When we heat it, it forms mercury and oxygen gas. And we said that we can detect the presence of oxygen gas by using a glowing splint. The glow of the splint will increase. The second example is the thermal decomposition of metal hydroxide. هيدروكسيد السيمبل بتاعه اي هيدروكسيد عندي OH، يبقى انا عندي الميتال هيدروكسيد يبقى السيمبل بتاع الميتال and OH. الميتال هيدروكسيد by heat it decomposes into metal oxide and water vapor. The example of metal hydroxide is copper hydroxide. The color of copper hydroxide is blue color, and the symbol of copper hydroxide is CuOH by 2. By heat, or by using heat, the copper hydroxide decomposes into copper oxide, which is black color substance, and water vapor. This arrow means that it evolves. Then the third example, the thermal decomposition of metal carbonate. Metal carbonate, it means metal combined with CO3, which is the carbonate group. Any metal carbonate, when it decomposes by heat, it forms metal oxide and carbon dioxide. طيب دلوقتي كده نعمل quick revision على ال 3 reactions اللي احنا خدناهم. metal oxide يعني metal combine مع الأكسجين. الثيرمال decomposition بتاع metal oxide it produces metal and oxygen. The second example is metal hydroxide, which is metal and hydroxide group, which is OH. When heating metal hydroxide, it produces metal oxide and water vapor. The third example is the metal carbonate. When heating metal carbonate, it produces metal oxide and carbon dioxide gas. Let's see the example. Copper carbonate. The color of copper carbonate is green color. لحد دلوقتي احنا اتكلمنا على 2 examples من الكومباوندز المشترك فيهم الكوبر. اتكلمنا عن الكوبر هيدروكسيد اللي الكالر بتاعه كان بلو، وقلنا ان هو by heating it produces copper oxide اللي الكالر بتاعه black plus water vapor. هنا اتكلمنا عن الكوبر كربونات الكالر بتاعه green. By using heat it decomposes into copper oxide also, which is black in color, and carbon dioxide gas. And we can detect the presence of carbon dioxide gas by using lime water. Carbon dioxide gas change the color of lime water from clear into turbid or milky. This is the copper carbonate. By heating it produces copper oxide. Number 4, the thermal decomposition of metal sulfate. Metal sulfate, it means metal with sulfate group, which is SO4. The thermal decomposition of metal sulfate, it produces metal oxide and sulfur trioxide. Sulfur trioxide, it means SO3. The example here is the thermal decomposition of copper sulfate. Copper sulfate, CuSO4, the color of copper sulfate is the same color of copper hydroxide, which is blue color. When heating copper sulfate, it decomposes into copper oxide, which has a black color, and sulfur trioxide, SO3. The last type of thermal decomposition reactions is the thermal decomposition of metal nitrate. Metal nitrate, it means metal and NO3 group. Metal nitrate, by heat, it forms metal nitrite, which is metal with NO2 group and oxygen gas. The thermal decomposition of sodium nitrate, NaNO3, which has a white color, by heating, it produces sodium nitrite, NO2, and oxygen gas. And the color of sodium nitrite is yellowish white color. يبقى دلوقتي احنا اتكلمنا عن 5 types أو 5 examples for the thermal decomposition reactions. أول type كان ال thermal decomposition of metal oxide، وقلنا إن ال metal oxide decomposes by heat to form metal and oxygen. The second example is the thermal decomposition of metal hydroxide, which decomposes by heat to form metal oxide and water vapor. The third type is the thermal decomposition of metal carbonate, which produces metal oxide and carbon dioxide. The type number 4 is the thermal decomposition of metal sulfate, which produces metal oxide also and sulfur trioxide. And the last type is the thermal decomposition of metal nitrate, which produces metal nitrite, NO2, nitrate, NO3. The thermal decomposition of metal nitrate, it produces metal nitrite and oxygen gas. Those were the 5 types of thermal decomposition reactions. And then you will talk about the second type of the chemical reactions, which is substitution reactions. Substitution reactions or replacement reactions. Reactions دي depend on the activity of metals. What is meant by the activity of metals? We have metals which are active and less active metals. طيب الساينتست اتفقوا ان هم يعملوا arrangement للelements according أو arrangement للmetals according to their chemical activity. الarrangement دي descendingly from the most active to the least active. والarrangement ده سموه chemical activity series. يبقى chemical activity series it is the arrangement of the metal in descending order according to what? According to the degree of chemical activity. This is the chemical activity series. Potassium, sodium, barium, calcium, magnesium, aluminium, zinc, iron, cobalt, nickel, tin, lead, hydrogen, copper, mercury, silver, and gold. طيب احنا دلوقتي محتاجين نتكلم عن انه كل الاليمنتس اللي below hydrogen can't replace or can't substitute the hydrogen, so they can't remove the hydrogen and replaces it. But any metal above the hydrogen can replace hydrogen and substitute it in the chemical reaction. We have 2 types of substitution reaction. Firstly, simple substitution, and secondly, the double substitution. Firstly, we will talk about the simple substitution reactions. Simple substitution reactions, they are chemical reactions in which one of the elements substitute another element. يعني عندي one element substitute another element. A substitutes B in a solution of one of its compound. So we have here an element and a compound. The single element will replace or substitute the other element in this compound. A plus BC, the A will replaces B and produce AC, and the B will goes alone. we have more than one type of simple substitution reaction. Firstly, a metal substitutes the hydrogen of water. In this reaction, a metal will react with water and it will remove the hydrogen of water and it will replace it. The metal substitutes hydrogen of water to produce metal hydroxide and hydrogen gas evolves. Sodium plus water. The water consists of hydrogen and hydroxide, H and OH. The sodium will replace the hydrogen. So the sodium will remove the hydrogen and combine with the hydroxide ion to produce sodium hydroxide compound. And the hydrogen gas evolves. يبقى احنا هنا عندنا الصوديوم قدر يعمل replacement للهيدروجين بتاعت الووتر ويعمل لها remove ويخرجها بره as a gas ويبدأ يعمل substitution أو replacement ويدخل هو مع الهيدروكسيد ion to produce sodium hydroxide compound. Then a metal substitute the hydrogen of an acid. هنا احنا ما بنعملش رياكشن بين الميتال والووتر، لا هنعمل رياكشن بين الميتال والاسيد. زي ما احنا دايما عارفين انه الاسيد هو substance اللي دايما starts with H except for water. اللي بيحصل انه الميتال بيعمل removing الهيدروجين ويدخل هو مع النون ميتال او مع الجروب اللي بتكون الاسيد، فبيتكون لي acid salt and hydrogen gas evolve. يبقى احنا هنا في كل الاحوال اذا كان عندي في اول رياكشن لما الميتال عمل substitution للهيدروجين of water hydrogen gas evolve وطلع لي metal hydroxide. هنا لما الميتال عمل substitute للهيدروجين of acid برضو الهيدروجين gas evolves وكان معاه compound اللي هو الاسيد salt. We have 3 examples. Zinc plus HCl, diluted HCl, DIL it means diluted. دينا zinc chloride and hydrogen gas evolves. Aluminium plus HCl هدينا aluminium chloride and hydrogen gas evolves. طيب in this case copper with HCl no reaction. Why the copper can't replace the hydrogen of the acid? Because the copper is found in the chemical activity series below the hydrogen. احنا اتفقنا انه any element above the hydrogen can replaces the hydrogen, but any element below the hydrogen can't replace the hydrogen. يبقى give reason copper can't substitute the hydrogen of hydrochloric acid because the copper is less active than the hydrogen as it comes below it in the chemical activity series. And as we have been studied before, we can detect the presence of hydrogen gas as it burned with pop sound. هنا عندنا اهو experiment الهيدروجين gas evolve ولما نجرب by using candle هيحصل burning الهيدروجين gas with a pop sound. طيب هنا مديني more than one example. مديني الصوديوم، الليد، مغنيسيوم، الايرون اند الكوبر. لو احنا هنشوف دلوقتي الاماونت اوف بابلز اللي ظهرت هي بتعبر عن الاكتيفيتي بتاعه الاليمنت بتاعي. هنا الصوديوم instantly reacts with the acid because it's one of the most active elements. Here the magnesium has bubbles more than any other elements. It comes below the sodium and then the iron and then the lead, and here in the copper there is no bubbles at all. That means that the copper doesn't react with the acid because the copper is less active than hydrogen. The third example is a metal substitute another metal in one of its salt solution. هنا عندي الميتال وده السولت سولوشن بتاع another metal. طبعا ده برضو معتمد على الكيميكال اكتيفيتي. احنا اتفقنا انه في ال substitution reaction it depends on the chemical activity series. المغنيسيوم is more active than copper so it can replaces it. طيب الكوبر سلفيت احنا اتفقنا من ال thermal decomposition reactions انه الكوبر سلفيت its color is blue. We have a blue solution and when we add a piece of magnesium the blue color will disappear and a rich brown precipitate appears at the bottom of the tube. اللي حصل هنا انه المغنيسيوم remove الكوبر والكوبر بريسبتد زي ما احنا شايفين من الارو ده كده والكوبر الكالر بتاعه is a reddish brown واتكون عندي salt solution تاني اسمه magnesium sulfate which its color is colorless. Let's talk now about the second type of substitution reaction which is called double substitution reaction. In the double substitution reactions, it is a reaction where double substitution occurs. What's meant by double substitution? It means double replacement. يعني اللي بيحصل ان انا بعمل exchange ببدل metal من compound بميتال من compound تاني between the ions of the two compounds to form two new compounds A, B and C, D. Okay, we replace A with C to form A, D and C, B. Again, A, B plus C, D. A will goes with D to form AD compound and C will goes with B to form CB compound. So instead of those two compounds we produces another two new compounds. What are the types of double substitution reactions? Firstly, reaction between acid and alkali, and this is one of the most famous reactions in chemistry, which is called neutralization reaction. In this neutralization reaction, it is a reaction which occurs or happens between an acid and alkali to form salt and water. The acid always starts with H and the alkali always starts with OH. Let's see what happens. HCl plus NaOH, this is the acid and this is the alkali. We replaces the H with the Na and this will form H and OH will produces water and Na with Cl produces a salt which is called table salt or sodium chloride. And the second type is the reaction between acid and salt. Sodium carbonate, and this is the salt, and hydrochloric acid. We replaces the hydrogen with sodium. It will produce sodium chloride and H2O and CO2. طيب احنا هنا لما نيجي نبص على الرياكشن ده عشان بس في تريك كده في الرياكشن ده هنا انا عملت ريبليسمنت بين الصوديوم وبين الهيدروجين فالمفروض انه هيتكون عندي NaCl and H2CO3 طبعا ال 2 وال 3 والكلام ده كله according to the balance of the equation وده معتمد على الفالنسي والكلام ده. طيب انا عندي هنا H2CO3 و NaCl. ال NaCl موجودة قدامي زي ما هي. طيب فين بقى ال H2CO3؟ ال H2CO3 ده أسيد اسمه كربونيك أسيد. تمام؟ الكربونيك أسيد ده هو المادة الأساسية اللي بتعمل منها السوفت درينكس، تمام؟ اللي هو البابلز اللي احنا بنشوفها دي هي عباره عن الكربون دايوكسيد اللي دايبه في الووتر ومعاها شوجر ومعاها اديتيفز ثانيه اذا كانت كلر او اذا كانت تيست او ايا كان الماده اللي محطوطه معاها. الكربونيك اسيد ده واحد من الويكست اسيدز، بيحصل له ديكومبوزيشن بسرعه جدا بيتفك، بدليل ان احنا لو فتحنا ازازه البيبسي او حاجه وسيبناها لفتره شويه هنلاقي بابلز بدات تخرج. بعد كده لما نيجي ندوق البيبسي هنلاقيها عباره عن ميه ومعاها سكر بس مش اكتر من كده، لانه البابلز والطعم اللسعه اللي بنحسها دي بوجود الكربون دايوكسيد اختفت، لان الكربون دايوكسيد خلاص كله ديسابير. فانا عندي الكربونيك أسيد بسرعة جدا بيحصل له decomposition ويتفك إلى كربون دايوكسيد جاز which evolves and water. عشان كده احنا في الرياكشن ده بنكتب NaCl plus H2O plus كربون دايوكسيد جاز. اتفقنا ان الكربون دايوكسيد can be detected by using lime water as carbon dioxide will turbid the clear lime water. طيب انا هنا لو عملت رياكشن ده اللي هو الصوديوم كربونات مع ال HCl هيطلع عندي جاز اللي هو الكربون دايوكسيد هيعمل بلوينج للبالون بتاعتي دي. الرياكشن ده احنا ممكن نعمله ببساطه جدا باستخدام البيكنج باودر مع الفينيجر او الليمون. هدي نفس الافكت لانه برضه هيطلع لي الكربون دايوكسيد جاز. طيب الثيرد تايب من الدبل سبستيوشن رياكشنز هو رياكشن بين two salt solutions. Two salt solutions يعني أنا عندي two salt each of them can be dissolved in water to form a solution وبعدين بنعمل mixing للتو solutions مع بعض علشان بيتكون لي precipitate. الprecipitate ده بيكون عبارة عن salt insoluble in water. يعني أنا عندي two salt solutions اتنين salts dissolve in water in the form of solution and when we mix them together an exchange happens. ال AG بيعمل replacement مع ال NA ال NA بيروح مع ال NO3 ويديني صوديوم نيتريت. تمام؟ وده soluble salt in water. وال AG بيعمل combine مع ال Cl ويديني AgCl اللي هو السيلفر كلورايد وده عبارة عن white precipitate because the silver chloride is insoluble salt in water. طيب بسرعة كده نقول تاني الكلام اللي احنا قلناه. احنا اتكلمنا firstly عن thermal decomposition reaction وقلنا ان هو عبارة عن reaction in which the compound break up by using heat to form elements or simpler substance. واتفقنا ان انا عندي 5 types. قلنا thermal decomposition بتاع الميتال اوكسايد، الميتال كربونات، الميتال نيتريت، الميتال سلفيت and الميتال هيدروكسايد. بعد كده اتكلمنا عن substitution reaction وقلنا ان هو فيه 2 types وهو معتمد على الكيميكال اكتيفيتي سيريز انه المور اكتيف replaces الليس اكتيف. اتكلمنا عن ال 2 types السمبل substitution وقلنا انه فيها element replaces another element. خدنا replacement of metal to the hydrogen of acid and to the hydrogen of water. بعد كده خدنا double substitution وقلنا ان هو عبارة عن exchange بين 2 ions to produce 2 different compounds. واخدنا فيها metal replaces واخدنا فيها the reaction between acid and alkali اللي هو neutralization reaction. اخدنا كمان reaction بين salt وacid. اخدنا reaction بين two salt solutions. في type كمان انا نسيت اقوله واحنا بنعمل ريفيجن دلوقتي في السمبل substitution reaction هو انه metal substitute another metal in each salt solutions وخدنا الاكزامبل عليها كان المغنيسيوم مع الكوبر سلفيت. Now we need to talk about the third type of the reaction which is called oxidation reduction reactions. In the oxidation and reduction reactions we have 2 ways to express it. Firstly, the traditional way which is according to the losing and gaining of oxygen or hydrogen, and the second way by losing or gaining electron. We have here a reaction between hydrogen and copper oxide to form copper and water. In this reaction, we see that the hydrogen will gain oxygen to produce water, and so the gaining of oxygen is called oxidation. And copper oxide loses oxygen to form copper metal. And here we can say that the losing of oxygen atom is called reduction. So the gaining of oxygen is called oxidation and the losing of oxygen is called reduction. And the substance which gains Oxygen is called reducing agent or reducing factor, and the substance which losing oxygen is called oxidizing agent. Let's see the definitions. Oxidation is a chemical process which causes the increase of oxygen percentage. Increase in oxygen percentage, it means gaining oxygen, and the decrease of in oxygen Let's see the definitions. Oxidation is a chemical process which causes the increase of the oxygen percentage. Increase in oxygen percentage, it means gaining oxygen, or the decrease of hydrogen percentage. While the reduction is a chemical reaction which causes the decrease in the oxygen percentage, or it means the losing of oxygen or increase in the hydrogen percentage. The definition of oxidizing factor or oxidizing agent is the same definition of reduction, but here in reduction we said that it's a chemical reaction, but in oxidizing factor we said that it's the substance. It is the substance which gives oxygen or which loses oxygen or takes away or gain hydrogen during the chemical reaction. And of course, the definition of reducing agent or reducing factor is the same as oxidation, but the difference is in oxidation we said it's a chemical process, and in reducing factor we said that it's a substance. It's a substance which takes away oxygen or gain oxygen or lose hydrogen during a chemical reaction. This was the oxidation and reduction from the point of view of losing or gaining oxygen or hydrogen. طيب نراجع بسرعة كده مع بعض. هنا على الرياكشن ده أنا عندي هنا الهيدروجين عملت gaining للأكسجين، تحولت لووتر. gaining أكسجين معناها أوكسيديشن، يبقى الهيدروجين في الحالة دي هيبقى اسمه reducing factor لأنه تسبب في إنه عمل reduction للكومباوند اللي جنبه. تمام؟ الكوبر أوكسايد لوز الأكسجين، ففي الحالة دي حصل له ريدكشن، والكوبر اوكسايد هيبقى اسمه اوكسيدايزنج ايجنت لانه اتسبب في انه حصل اوكسيديشن للاذر elements او الاذر substance. تمام؟ طيب let's see the other concept for oxidation and reduction. الاوكسيديشن and reduction from the other concept هنا معتمد على losing والgaining of electrons، وده درسناه previously. طيب أنا عندي هنا رياكشن بين الصوديوم والكلورين to form sodium chloride or table salt. طيب لو جينا نبص هنا هنلاقي إنه الصوديوم أتوم اتحول إلى صوديوم أين ولوز 2 إلكترونز. الكلورين أتوم أو الكلورين جاز، كلورين موليكيول اتحول إلى كلورين أين عن طريق إن هو عمل gaining لل 2 إلكترونز ال lost by صوديوم. طيب نشوف الكلام ده بقى عن طريق الالكترونز. الصوديوم لوز 1 الكترون والكلورين جين الالكترون ده، فتحول الصوديوم الى صوديوم اين وتحول الكلورين الى كلورين اين. يبقى هنا اقدر اقول انه السبستانس اللي عملت لوزنج للالكترونز بنقول انه حصل لها اوكسيديشن، والاذر سبستانس اللي عملت جيننج الالكترون بقول انه حصل لها ريدكشن. فيبقى السبستانس اللي حصل لها اوكسيديشن او السبستانس اللي لوز one or more electron is called reducing agent, والسبستانس اللي gain one or more electron is called oxidizing agent. يبقى هنا الاوكسيديشن it's a chemical process where the atom loses an electron or more. والreduction it's a chemical process where the atom gain one electron or more. والاوكسيدايزنج فاكتور او oxidizing agent هي substance which gain an electron or more، والreducing factor هي substance اللي lose one electron or more. يبقى أنا دلوقتي عندي two definitions for the oxidations, two definitions for the reduction, two definitions for the oxidizing factor, two definitions for the reducing factor. واحد من كل definition دي related للtraditional concept اللي هو losing or gaining oxygen or hydrogen, والother definition is related to the other concept which is losing or gaining of electron. لو أنا عندي reaction هبدأ أشوف عندي هل حصل losing و gaining للهيدروجين والأكسجين ولا حصل losing للإلكترون و gaining للإلكترون، وعلى الأساس ده هبدأ أقرر البروسيس A والسبستانس A. هقول تاني، السبستانس اللي حصل لها oxidation بنسميها reducing agent، السبستانس اللي حصل لها reduction بنسميها oxidizing agent. ال two processes are concurrent يعني يحصلوا مع بعض. دايما اللوزنج بيحصل مع gaining. دلوقتي انا عندي substance حصل لها losing للاكسجين، يبقى الاذر substance عملت ايه؟ gain الاكسجين دي. عندي substance حصل لها losing للالكترون، السبستانس اللي معاها او الاليمنت اللي معاها عمل gaining للالكترون ده، عشان كده بنسميهم two concurrent processes. بكده نكون خلصنا كل types of chemical reactions اللي هما 3 types: ال thermal decomposition reactions, ال substitution reactions، وكمان ال oxidation and reduction reactions. We have only one part which is the talking about airbags. What are airbags? ال airbags دي هي one of the most important safety means at emergency in cars or means of transportation. الايرباكس دي الديزاين بتاعها ان هي once ان الكار بيحصل لها hitting او crashing مع another object تبدأ يحصل لها inflating within only 40 milliseconds in a very short time. Then they vacuumed rapidly to ensure both clear vision and proper movement. يعني ايه الكلام ده؟ يعني once ان الكار حصل لها crashing مع any other object تبدأ الايرباك دي يحصل لها inflating او blowing with air او with special gas، وبعد كده يبدأ يحصل لها vacuumed يعني losing this gas علشان يبدأ الدرايفر يبقى عنده clear vision and proper movement ويقدر يتحرك بالكار بعد كده مرة تانية. طيب ايه السبستانس اللي موجوده inside the airbag اللي بتعمل inflating للايرباج؟ انا عندي السبستانس دي اسمها صوديوم ازايد NaN3. الصوديوم ازايد دي once انه بيحصل crashing مع another object بيبدا يحصل عندي electric spark. الالكتريك سبارك ده هو بيعمل زي thermal decomposition بالظبط، وبيبدا break up the sodium azide compound into sodium and nitrogen. النيتروجين جاز ده هو اللي بيعمل inflating للاير باج. يبقى احنا اتفقنا ان الكومباوند اللي موجود inside the air bag is called sodium azide. When crashing happen for this car, the sodium azide is decomposed through an electric spark into sodium and the nitrogen, which is a gas, it will inflate or blow the air bag. By the end of this part, we come to the end of our lesson. Thank you so much. Hope to see you again in another lessons, inshallah. Goodbye.